So I think the argument that you're making is that he wasn't just driven by political ambition or the conquering energy that perhaps any marauder of any faith would come with, but that he was actually, he had this sense of the believer and the non-believer, the believer
Yes.
and the quote unquote the kafir. But at
See,
the
yes,
same time, he sought kind of blessings for himself, even from people of
yeah.
different faiths.
Yes, true. And I think in the uncertainty that his life was put, a stormy rules. Just 17 years he ruled, 1782 to
Yes.
1799. Probably there was not a single day that didn't go without a war or some kind of conflict somewhere. So in the face of so much uncertainty, this man turned to so much of superstition, divination mechanisms, relying hugely on astrology. Both Hindu and Muslim astrologers. In fact, even on the
Hmm.
last day of his life, on 4th of May, in a very poignant end that he has, even that morning he's consulting astrologers, saying when should I set out for fight, what is the route that my Mars is taking in which axis. All of this he's discussing even on that day, and people are
Hmm.
doing japam, someone is doing something else in a mosque and so on, praying for him. But when you talk about the religious bigotry, now Hyder, as I said, was no less cruel. I mean, when it came to war and the kind of atrocities, we can say that kingship is closely aligned with violence, which is no doubt
Yeah.
of that era, which was a
Yeah.
different era. But Hyder, at least when it came within the kingdom, there's no overt messaging about the faith coming in anywhere. In the case of Tipu Sultan, while there is an element of conquest and vanquishing the conquered, there is a double whammy here, which comes with also targeting on the basis of identity, on the basis of a person's faith or religion. So, in fact,
And how do you reconcile that with, how do you reconcile the destruction of temples with the grants to temples? Like, how do you reconcile both of these facts?
so the grants also, I mean, many of them, I've actually listed several
Yes.
grants that he made. Many of them, actually, if you investigate, they were on the obverse of a silver cup or something, which was given to the Shrikanteshwara temple in Nanjangud. The inscription is of someone else who's made the same grant earlier. So he probably
Hmm.
confiscated it and then redonated
Hmm.
it back to many
Hmm.
temples. So that way, many of these get busted. Several of these, grants were actually made during Haidar's rule, not Tipu's rule. But since he just continued it, or he didn't know that this was going on, the Guruvayur temple in Kerala. Now, the priest there got to know that he's going to demolish the deity, and so in stealth they take it away, and it is kept in another place called Ambalapula, and that place is worshipped even to this day, because that place gave shelter temporarily to the deity. Now there are records that there are grants that came from Tipu to this temple. We can't reconcile that. On the one hand, you wanted to destroy the idol, and on the other hand, you're giving
Correct.
grants. Then you investigate that these were actually at the behest of Hyder, which either he overlooked, or there was some intermediary. There was a guy called Hydros Putti in Kerala, in Guruvayur, who shielded this knowledge from the Sultan and continued the grant. So a lot of local subversion also that way, which ensured that he did not take action. But I wanted to make one point.
Hmm.
When we talk of a lot of scholars who say the British demonized him and made him appear like this bigot and a hated object. The British actually have no such accounts of Hyder Ali. In fact, many of them,
Hmm.
including Wilkes and Bowring and all these people from the colonial times, and my Hindu historians of Mysore of the early 20th century, Hayavardhan Rao and others, they say though he was so cruel and all of that, people had a certain deal of respect for him, either grudgingly or whatever, because they knew that his
Hmm.
disposition may be that of a cruel monarch, but he was not personally vindictive to many of them. And in fact, the British would have had a bigger axe to grind against Hyder, because he defeated them black and blue. I mean, in the first Anglo-Mysore War, the second Anglo-Mysore War, he goes to the very gates of Madras, and the British could have actually been wiped out of India, had he been a little more tactful, and his allies, the other Indian players, supported him. So it would actually help the British to demonize Hyder more than to demonize
Yeah.
a Tipu who actually never won a single war against the British, mind you. The third and the fourth Anglo-Mysore War that he fought, independently without the shadow of his father, he was horribly defeated, and the last one he was killed. So a killed person, I mean, to demonize him for what joy? I mean, they would ideally do that to someone who, actually embarrassed and defeated them multiple times.
But Vikram, talking about the British, I mean, certainly Tipu Sultan was killed by the British, right? He died fighting the
Yeah,
British.
yeah.
Um, and you, of course, have told the tale of how even in those last moments he was betrayed by his own people. He could not actually use the safe passage that he thought was available to him. That passage was blocked, and so he died in that sense, a sad, sort of a sad, defeated king, but fighting the British. Now, even this has been contested. Like, in this case, so you have the Congress and the left, and parties like Asaduddin Owaisi's party celebrating Tipu Sultan, and on the other side, and we've seen this in every election season, you have the right wing basically erasing how Tipu Sultan died. And I think there's enough evidence to show how he was killed.
Yeah. So, in fact, right in the prologue, I debunk both sides. I mean, if the Congress and their
Yeah.
allied parties talk about him in glowing terms, I've equally criticized what the BJP did in the run up to the 2023 elections. You had this whole myth created of this Gowda chieftains called Uri Gowda and Nanjay Gowda, who they claimed were the ones who killed Tipu and not the British.
And these people existed, or they never existed?
No, no, I don't think it's a complete myth. Not a single historian, British or Mysore, for 200 years ever got to know that there was someone like this. And the BJP somehow managed to, do such
Yeah.
high-end research and get
Yeah.
this thing out. Which is why, Barkha, I think when people like this or characters like this of the past or topics like this become such a hot potato political football, I think the responsibility lies on the slender shoulders of historians like me to kind of put things in a perspective, that there are multiple opinions and views to someone like this, and neither of them are doing service to the legacy or the truth of a person as polarizing as Tipu Sultan.
So how did he die? Tell us about that. I know you write about it in your book, but give us a sense. Like, we've spoken a little bit about it. He had this passage he was supposed to escape from, and that he was betrayed. He was
Yes.
betrayed by his own. And then he said, okay, if I'm betrayed, I'll go back and I'll fight. And he died, and he was killed.
Yeah, it was a losing battle, and he knew that he was trying to escape from various routes. As you said, that one passage was actually blocked by Mir
Yeah.
Sadiq, one of his most trusted ministers, who turned against him. So it was not only the Hindus. So the Purnaya was also supposedly a traitor, but even the Muslims who, the last few years of his life, even a very, very favorable biographer like Dennis Forrest calls Tipu being completely overtaken by mental blindness. You see it like a Greek tragedy unfolding scene by scene, where he's so shocked and paranoid after the loss of the Third Anglo-Mysore War. He was sleeping in a hammock that was suspended from the ceiling, and this hammock was in such a way that it could not be seen from outside. So it's suspended midair, so that anytime there is a secret attack, he could jump off. The hammock is actually fully loaded with pistols and swords. So you can imagine the amount of paranoia that one could have had to be in such a circumstance. And so in the Fourth Mysore War, when Richard Wellesley sends his troops and the allied forces encircle Srirangapatna, there's lots of back and forth. He tries to wriggle out, doesn't succeed. Then these people ask him to escape, which is not a bad thing. His father had done a similar thing, regroup, and then come back and live on for another day and fight. He tries that. In fact, there are evidences of how he asked his family members and some treasures and other things to be pushed through that passage. But as you said, that was locked, sealed from him. And then he's literally left in the open, and he has so little to do other than keep fighting till the last that he can. And the British soldiers who rush into the fort of Srirangapatna on that fateful day, they don't even recognize that this is the Sultan of Mysore. They just see this man who was trying to kill as many people as possible. Their attention is caught by the rich jewels and a brooch that he's wearing. And to get that, they actually strike at him and he falls. And by the time the day ends and the sun sets over a literal, fortress of hell that Srirangapatna has become that day, putrid bodies lying everywhere, vultures, encircling the place. The family is also aghast. They don't know where he has gone. The British are scared. They don't know if he's actually, escaped or he's hiding in the Zenana. And so they try to search the palace. They don't find him. Finally, a search party goes. And that is where, amidst a heap of dead bodies, they find, his hand clasping the sword. And they, identify him and bring him out and give him a ceremonial funeral. So it was a Shakespearean tragedy, a Greek tragedy that was, unraveling itself chapter by chapter. And sometimes you feel sad for the man, but at other times, if you look at it objectively, he brought this misery on himself due to his lack of foresight, due to his hubris, due to his unbridled arrogance, megalomania, this bloated self-image about yourself, where you think you are larger than life. Wilkes talks of instances where he was blasphemous enough to compare himself to the holy prophet, and sometimes even higher than him. So when that kind of madness gets into anybody's head, it's very difficult to survive and prosper.
Those who celebrate him call him a symbol of resistance against the British. Now, you of course don't dispute the fact that he died fighting the British. Um, but there are also other narratives that talk about him trying to stitch an alliance with Napoleon against the British, him using modern weaponry, in these battles. Are there shades of grey here? Would you call him a religious bigot who was a symbol of resistance against the British? Are both of these facts,
Both of these are
facts?
facts. Of course, that he was a symbol of resistance against the British is undoubted. And the very fact that it took the British 40 years to conquer Mysore, under both
Mm,
father and son, 4 wars to vanquish it. And that was the last obstacle in the setting up of the British Raj in India. And Richard Wellesley is called the father of the British Empire because he was the one who managed this. Undoubtedly a symbol of resistance and a bigot, both of it. But was he a freedom fighter? Because it's not for the British having won the war. If the French had won, there, the French were no less colonial. It took us, longer time to redeem Pondicherry from French control than the rest of India. So we in Karnataka may have been speaking French today rather than Kannada. And the fact that you're inviting foreign powers to invade India. His letters to Zaman Shah. So on the one hand, he's talking to the
mm,
French and using their hatred and rivalry with the British to his advantage, which is a perfectly legitimate thing to do in war. Enemy is enemy is your friend and all of that. But to the
mm,
Muslim world, to the larger Ummah, he was also projecting himself as the most ideal Muslim ruler of India, saying the Mughal empire has collapsed and he's a powerless puppet in the hands of infidels, the Marathas and others. And I am the only true Muslim. See, I have killed so many people, I have burned so many temples down and churches down, and I'm establishing the true faith. So come and help me. So in his letters to Zaman Shah, the Afghan Durrani
mm,
ruler of Afghanistan, there's a clear plan of action saying for 2 years let us have this nationwide war, where in the first year you defeat all of North India, will depose the Mughal, take over Delhi, and then in the second year let's liberate southern India from the Kafir rule, and then let both of us divide the entire India between ourselves as an Islamic caliphate. And the same measure goes to the Shah of Persia, to the Turkey Sultan. So where religious sentiments could be invoked, he did that too, to actually talk of establishing a pan-Islamist, very much influenced by then by the emerging Wahhabi ideology, which started gaining ground in the Middle East. So to establish that pure, austere Islamic rule in not only Mysore but the whole of India, I don't know in those circumstances how
mm.
you could call him a freedom fighter. That he was a symbol of resistance against the British. No one can have two views on that. He may have lost against them, but he was a symbol. But that's what Barkha, I think, post independence, the popular narrative is anyone who fought against the British is a hero, irrespective of what all else you might have done in your, in your rule. So the popular media too, in cinema,
Hmm.
it's always the British who's the bad guy, the Indian subaltern who's fighting against him is the hero or the heroine. That's how our Lagan and everything is showcased that way. I think he falls in that compartment, and that is why this exalted image for him, and calling him India's first freedom fighter, which I feel is stretching it a bit too much.
Hmm. So, okay, so you make the distinction between being a freedom fighter and being anti-British, and I think the argument you're making is he was ready to engage with other imperialist forces to protect his own kingdom. But given that you do agree that he did resist the British, and given that the British are the ones who colonized India, when governments like the Siddaramaiah government in the past, and they're back in power in Karnataka, have, for example, featured Tipu Sultan in the tableau. If you remember, that's how a lot of this debate started. There is there's a big argument over how he should be commemorated, whether he should be commemorated. Where do you weigh in on that debate?
See, I generally don't wade into the murky world of politics. I like to stay far away. They can do what
Yes.
they wish to do. And
Yes.
the theater of the absurd will continue when it comes to Indian
Correct.
politics, as you and I have often discussed.
Correct.
Uh, I really don't mind if a group of people, individuals, get together and form a Tipu Sultan fan club or something, and they commemorate whatever they do, his birth anniversary. It's a free country; anyone can do anything. But when an elected government, on taxpayers' money, actually commemorates someone whose atrocities, cruelties is not some frozen episode of the past. You have in the intergenerational trauma, living traditions, oral traditions, which are present even to this day. When Tipu Jayanti was ordered in 2015, forget what the BJP did. It would have done what it was expected to do. But you had citizen groups, the Christians of Mangalore, the Nayars in Kerala, the Kodava National Council, in Coorg. All these people who had nothing to do with an anti-Congress policy or a pro-BJP policy, they also jumped into the field saying, please don't valorize and celebrate someone like this because our ancestors have suffered immensely under him. So the Christians obviously had nothing common with the Sangh Parivar's ideology. Otherwise, they're all the time on the other side of the fence with them. So, and the Mandya Mayangars, whom I said, if a community in your own state is still having those memories and is not celebrating a festival, every year on 12th of December, the Kodavas have, a commemoration called Martyrs' Day, where on 12th of December 1785, Tipu invited, several of the Kodava chieftains in thousands with a false sense of hope that we were doing a rapprochement and we're actually coming together. And once they came there, they were all unarmed. And by stealth, there was a huge massacre at this place called Devati Param. And to this day, people assemble there. In fact, just this morning in the newspaper, I read something about how they plan to commemorate this day in the following month in December. So when that happens, there is a responsibility of a democratically elected government to also go by the wishes of your people. You commemorate sovereigns. Now, in 1947, when we turned our backs on princely states and we decided to become a democratic republic, I think that was done with some sense in mind that what kind of virtues and you want to valorize and celebrate in your kings before. So if your sovereign is someone who did something for the larger benefit and welfare of the people, say Ahilyabai Holkar or someone like that, who's a positive influence, which is visible even to this day. If a government celebrates that, it is still okay. But to commemorate this on taxpayers' money, especially when he has such a troubled report card, and with the clear, very perverse intention that you're doing this to cultivate a vote bank, which is based on communal grounds, I think that is certainly, very, very, it's a travesty.
Let me end by asking you to tell me one thing that Tipu Sultan is credited for that is incorrect, and one thing he is criticized for that is also incorrect.
Credited, I think we discussed this about his whole idea that it's going to be a freedom fight and liberating India and so on.
Right.
Which I don't think there was that kind of view, considering constantly, even to Louis the 16th in France, he sends emissaries. He sends emissaries to the Isle of France in Mauritius, again with the idea of France invading India and it becoming a French colony. So this whole freedom fight is something that I think is a little far-fetched. The criticized part is very tough because a lot of what he's criticized, I've actually tried to, I've shown that things are true, except these crazy stories like that Uri Goda and all those things, which, again, done with the same perverse intention. If one group is trying to cultivate the Muslim vote bank, you want the Wakaliga vote bank against it in South Karnataka. So I think that is something that, I discovered is completely false and there is no historical evidence or proof of this.